Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming to my talk. So I am from a company called Staples VR up in Auckland. I am a game developer generalist, so I can speak from production, art, programming, everything. So it is a bit of a big topic, but this really is a beginner's talk. And it's for anyone who's thinking about starting to go into VR development, what things you need to consider and things like that. So I've been working at Staples VR for about 5 years in virtual reality, and I've really enjoyed doing it, and I've also really not enjoyed doing it. So hopefully the lessons that I learned I can pass to you guys so that you don't have to go through all that stuff that comes with VR. Staples VR is a company that does sort of commercial client-based virtual reality applications and training, things like that. If anyone has any questions or wants to know anything about Staples, please come talk to me. I'm going to be here for the rest of the day, and I'd love to share what we do and why we do it and all that sort of stuff. But going into the talk, so as I mentioned, it's for beginners. I'm going to start off by talking about the equipment and what you guys need to have in your tool belt before you get started, maybe things to consider. Then I'm going to talk about how you create it, the software development kits available, what they look like, and then I'm going to go into some design things to keep in mind going forward. Cool, so starting off with head-mounted displays, the headset's the main thing to do with VR. So there's a lot I can say about these, and I am aware that not everyone is going to be in a position like Staples VR is to be able to have access to any headset at any time. You might just have access to whatever headset you can loan or whatever you can afford, but there are just a couple things to keep in mind when you are developing on your first headset that you may in the future want to develop for standalone versus desktop. And there's different requirements and different limitations with each. So if I was to categorize the headsets into two different types, there is standalone, which has its own sort of operating system, it's its own system altogether, and it's Android based, and then you have desktop, which you plug into a computer. So as you can see up there, standalone has an Android APK build, and it is, I would say, equivalent to a high-powered mobile phone. It's not quite at the same level you'd get a PC or laptop, so you've got to keep that in mind. And then desktop is whatever computer that has the minimum requirements. If anyone knows much about computers, I think a 1060 Ti would be the lowest you'd want to go graphics-wise, and then the equivalent processors or whatever that are out when that was out. So standalone headsets, because you're working in more of a mobile area, they're more difficult to work with out the bat, and you can't, it's difficult to transfer your APK onto it, it's difficult to optimize for it, and it's kind of difficult to access altogether. However, when you do get your games working on it, it's a lot easier, as you could imagine, to do demonstrations and showcase your game. So if you are going into VR development and you've got a old Oculus plug-in headset with some sensors, think about, you might in future want to go to Quest. So think about the fact that the standalone headsets have, they need to be really tiny to upload to the stores, and it is APK. So you've got to be thinking about developing for mobile as well. So just discussing some brands, I have had experience with so many different brands of headsets, so if anyone wants to approach me about a specific one you're thinking about, please do. And when it comes to approaching, if you're going to invest in a headset to start doing your VR development, think about what the brand's goals are, because that can be important in what direction you want to go in. The biggest example I want to give is with the Oculus Quest. We were really excited for the Oculus Quest and going down that route because it was like, it just felt amazing. But then they really hit us with the Facebook account thing that I think some people will know about, where you have to have a Facebook account locked to that headset, and to change account you need to factory reset it, and we've experienced that if you factory reset a Quest it bricks and you need to send it away, and then it takes like ages to get it back. So for commercial purposes, I don't know if the Quest and Oculus is a good route to go down at this point, and it's something you've got to really think about what their goals are, what they're intending on doing. But for commercial, have a look at what their goals are as well, because it might be simpler, easier to share all their, their goals around that. Is really exciting. So keep that in mind when going down the different routes, what their goals are. I would like to have an honourable mention to the Valve Index. I think that headset is really impressive, and the knuckles are the most advanced controllers I've seen. So definitely have a look at those. And then if you are in an academic space, you're looking at doing things like, testing out methods or psychology, anything like that. Honourable mention to the HP Reverb Omnicept Edition. We have a version of it in our office at the moment that we're playing with, and I don't actually know how available it is right now, but essentially what it is, it's a headset that has built-in sensors, and they've developed a whole SDK for it where you can kind of tap in and get that information to be able to help record how people are interacting with your VR. And I found it really interesting that they've actually come up with a system for cognitive load and been able to record how much someone's concentrating. And a recent workshop I went to, when they were talking about it, they mentioned being able to, like, the idea of knowing how your player is feeling in the game and changing the game around that to make it more immersive or interesting, or so that they're not confused. So that is really interesting if you're in the academic space or even the commercial space. And also, speaking about the commercial space, have a look at what HTC is doing with their new Focus. Again, we have a version that I'm not sure is publicly available, but they're doing things like having a detachable battery. They're doing things like having a business platform and being able to control, if you have multiple people in a headset at once at an event. It's really great for that sort of space. So I hope with those examples you can see that really investing in your first headset, you want to think about what are the brand goals. Because when it comes to development, you can, I'm about to explain, you can actually develop quite agnostically, but the headset you invest in and what you're going towards kind of can be swayed for the future. So release platforms, keeping that in mind before you start. Where are you going to push your game to? What your goals are with that, especially with standalone headsets, because you can't just kind of put out an executable that people can play and try really easily. It doesn't work like that, in my experience anyway. I know that there's probably more, or there could be more release platforms than that, but those are the ones I've had experience with. And just to wrap up my experience over the years that I've been dealing with these platforms, Oculus has a little bit of a barrier to entry where they review everything, and if your idea is bad or they don't like your mechanics or anything like that, they can just say no. They can be reasonable, they cannot be reasonable, you don't know. So allow for enough time to figure that out. Do not even think about going to Oculus if you're not assigning yourself enough time to go through that review process, because they're a bit picky. Viveport is really simple, but I feel like it's often not really looked at. You can upload something very, very easily, and the whole process I found is a dream, but generally you don't get as many downloads in my experience. Not many people are on that, and again, it is to Vive, and Vive isn't the hot thing right now. I shouldn't say that. Vive, I didn't mean it. Don't watch this. And Steam, if anyone has developed on Steam, it's the same process. Do not be afraid. It's the same thing. We've recently uploaded a DLC for one of our games that is a virtual reality DLC. That whole process was very smooth. So, don't worry about that. And you can sideload for standalone headsets, which is a way to get your APK onto the headset. There are some there's a way to do it in the documents, which is a bit technical. So if you're not a technical person, if you're in art, you can do a thing called side loading, and there's software out there that you can use, and that software changes all the time. If you're in a pinch, I can recommend SideQuest. It's a bit addy, it's a bit dodgy. In my opinion, if you'd only use it if you really need to get it on there, but yeah, that's just a little bit of a tip for anyone that's in a pinch to get it on the headset. Okay, so I will go into software development kits. So I'm sure that there's going to be different levels of experience in game dev in here. I'm a Unity developer, but everything that I'm saying is going to apply to Unreal as well. And a software development kit is essentially a bunch of files and code that you're going to get that's going to help you plug in your headset and get going straight away. And I just want to tell you what is in that software development kit and the different types. So going into it, the very first thing is the beautiful camera rig prefab that you're going to get. And it is essentially just a drag and drop feature where you have hands and a head, and you press play and it's all tracking. So tracking is all automatic, and especially in Unity, everything just happens. So you don't have to worry about that. Don't worry about this being more complicated than it sounds. And if I was to give any advice, I would say that with the software development kits, the camera rigs are all slightly different, but they're all kind of the same. The one thing that stumps people every time when I get new game devs in and they're working in VR, they're like, where's the controllers? I can't see the controllers in the scene. They appear automatically when you press play. And it, depending on what software development kit, depends on whether your controller will show up, but essentially that's how it works. So don't get stuck on that for a day, because I like to avoid people doing that. And also in the software development kit, you get some controller mapping and examples of controller mapping. My advice is to first, when you're going into mapping the buttons of your controllers, go onto the SDK or Unity or Unreal's documentation on what that looks like. You'll have a picture of the controller and points to, how you sort of map that. And I think that that's sort of a really good way to approach it, rather than just stealing examples from what already exists, and then because they put in so much faff you don't need, and that'll kind of help you develop a little bit cleaner, because everything needs to be quite optimized. Just realized the time. So these are your different options. SteamVR is probably the most agnostic of the bunch. As you could imagine, Windows Mixed Reality is a bit complicated. I wouldn't recommend that for a beginner. And OpenVR is getting phased out. OpenXStar is getting phased in. So we're not using either of those because one is not being used and not going to be relevant, and the other one's not relevant enough yet. Design and planning. So just going over what are some changes and challenges from game dev to VR dev that you're going to have to keep in mind. Do not, when it comes to movement, all your expertise, valued, respected in what you know on how to design a game and build a game, but you have to change when you go to VR, otherwise you're going to make people sick. Your movement is completely different. Do not have the same movement. Do not push people forward, and I'll talk about that in a second, but yeah, consider your movement. Consider your controls and controllers. People aren't going to instantly know what the buttons are, what they do. You've got to have an exposition for that, because people aren't going to just jump on and know exactly unless, I say that because headsets and controllers change so often that you're more likely to get people that don't understand how to use your controller. Interface, avoid bright whites and avoid thin lines, because it's hard to see. So if you're starting with your branding, try and avoid any bright colors that in a dark space are going to hurt people's eyes. You've got to think compassionately when you design your interface. And you want to be using world space canvases rather than things stuck to the screen. I've seen that a couple times, and that's like, because they have to use their peripherals to look, and it's very uncomfortable. So you've got to be a bit compassionate about that. User behavior, they're going to do whatever they want, and you need to design for I call them the dinosaurs, but like people who stand there like this that don't reach out. Design for those people, and then also design for these people that go spam, 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 spam. They do it in games. You'll understand. I'm too movie for controllers. You'll understand more how to design for someone who's a bit spammy, but there's also people that are a bit reluctant. So you got to if you make something fall from the roof, they're going to instantly want to catch it, and that's how you teach them to touch. Things like that. And performance, optimize everything, because you're not going to get much space. Headset sucks it all up. This is my overview of not making people sick. So players feel motion sickness when their perception of where the body is different to what they're actually doing in their mind. So if you're pushing people and they're not physically moving, or they don't feel like they're in something that's moving, it's going to make them feel sick. So you want to completely avoid that. And ways to do that, you can use teleport mechanics, but be compassionate about that, about the speed in which they can teleport, because if they still feel like they're going full throttle, they're still going to get sick, especially with people who are inclined to get motion sickness. We want those people to not think that VR isn't for them, and it doesn't have to not be for them. Optimization. So I realized last night that I didn't put anything on code optimization, but if you guys are game devs, you probably already know how to do that kind of stuff. But these are my key tips for optimization in the art side of things. Avoid large file sizes. Avoid high poly counts. That's really a given. Be very picky with your visual effects when you use them. Use them for a reason. Don't just use them because you want to. And avoid real-time lighting. Do baked lighting. That means your models need to be UV unwrapped properly with non-overlapping UVs. Want to keep that in mind for VR dev, because real-time lighting, like my experience is starting with the Gear VR, I put one point light in the scene with hardly anything else going on, and just, nah. So just be careful with that. Avoiding boring VR gameplay. Here are my suggestions, my keys to making fun in VR. From my experience, we turn out projects monthly, and I've been doing that for about 5 years, so I kind of got an idea of stuff that works and stuff that doesn't, and focus on clever exposition. Don't be like, same as game dev. Don't tell someone you're teaching them something. Drop something from the ceiling, make them catch it, or make them pick something up from the floor that they would generally pick something up. A mobile phone's a good one, because everyone knows you pick up a mobile phone. Things like that. Think about your objects and how they relate to people in the real world to teach them the mechanics of the game. More interacting with random stuff and less watching and reading. I don't know how many people would have seen they have this, the showcase on the Vive Focus, where all the stuff is happening around you and you're just sitting there watching, and it's supposed to be this beautiful introduction to the headset, and it was such a flop and so boring in my opinion, because they're doing this demo for this is my headset, this is what it can do, and you're just sitting there just going like, oh, pretty lights that are kind of low res, and I've seen better fireworks than this. Watching and reading, especially with 360 video VR, is really good, but if your content isn't based on that, don't have them sit there and do nothing unless they're unless you know they're tired. Bring all the stuff to the player. Where I used to designing in VR, where we're getting in game dev, where we get people to explore places and go, and we want them to go out and have a look at everything. But with VR, because you don't want to exhaust them or make them sick, you need to bring that world to them and then move them into different places that brings the world to them. And that's how you make it more fun for them, because they're touching things and they're exploring, they're in the moment, because VR, you're in the moment, you're immersed. And one thing I learned recently when I was talking to HP is thinking about how you can pick up on your players' energy levels during all parts of the games and adapt your game in real time around how they're feeling. So if they're tired, give them a campfire, give them a minute to chill. If you know they're high energy and they're ready to keep going, throw more stuff at them. If they've had a break for a while and you know they're going to be getting bored soon, this is how you maintain that retention for them to not only want to keep playing in that moment, but to come back. Because I find that with a lot of VR games I play, I get really sort of, I get to a stage where I don't go back to that game. I play it, I'm just like, nah, I had it, I experienced it, I know everything. Because it didn't really pull me in any way. So you want to avoid that. And extrinsic motivations aren't as popular anymore. What I'm just kind of getting to with that is that the reward system of you get a star or you pick up a gem, that's not really as powerful as emotion in VR. So just keep in mind that if you have a game idea and you're like, it's about, collecting all the stuff and having all the stuff, in VR you don't really have the ability, you don't really want them spending hours going through an inventory. So reward them in a different way, in a different type of motivation. In my opinion, from the games I've played, these games, however old, however basic, to me demonstrate really good design and replayability in VR for all different reasons. I would strongly recommend Accounting because it's quite psychological and it anticipates what you're thinking before you're thinking it, and then it makes fun of you for it. And I love that in VR. If you can be like, this person's going to mess this up, let's make fun of them, do it. I love that. And that's something a little cheeky you can do in VR that you can't really do in game dev, as effectively, because it's more personal when you're immersed. And then here are my key takeaways for the talk. Just going over that, and also please do have a look at our website at Staples VR for the projects we do. It is incredibly outdated. We haven't updated in about 2.5 years. So I apologize for that, but it will give you a little bit of what we've used to do. And again, please come talk to me if you want to talk about our projects, what we do, or if you're interested in working in the VR space. Yeah. All right, so they would have mentioned that I am going to check out that question app. So if you guys have any questions for me, please post them. No? Any questions in the room? Yes? Oh, sorry, we're just going to have to bring the mic to you.
There we go.
How long does the Oculus review process take?
Oof. Depends what year you're uploading. It changes. I would say the best, if you're worried about how long the review process takes, go onto their website and have a look at what their estimated is, because they will always communicate when that fluctuates, and it fluctuates yearly. We like to reserve 2 weeks for the review process if we're confident. If we're not confident, maybe just 2 weeks, but do let the client or our people who are waiting on us know that it could be longer. It's all about communication, but it also depends on your game, and if they have a core problem with one of your biggest mechanics or movement, that might be a whole game rebuild, because they can do that. They can say, no, that's going to make people sick. You can't make it like that, and you've got to change everything and anything to get it up there.
Cool. Do we have any other questions in the room? Yeah.
When would you choose to swap between controller hands and posable hands, if you get me?
Okay.
Yeah.
So how we usually do it is we will have hands and controllers for people who we know aren't going to be used to VR and aren't going to use it often. And but for games, we generally would use hands because people get hands. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Cool. I think there was just one up the front there, wasn't there? That's that. Even though you're close enough, just for the room.
Thank you. You've mentioned that making players sick is one of the criteria that Oculus looks for when reviewing. What other things are they looking out for that they might deny something for? I don't know if you've got examples. You can talk about NDAs and all, but it might be helpful.
Yeah, so we actually did have one prototype that was denied and that we still haven't actually pushed up. And it was a mechanic thing. It was because we were kind of breaking one of our own rules, but we had to move someone on a bike and they just didn't like that. But it can also be just general quality and graphics. I say this, but again, it changes. So the first thing you should do is go and read their criteria, however their documentation may be. They're going to communicate what their criteria is, and they communicate it quite well when you're uploading it as well. One thing I will say about Oculus is that there's a 1 gigabyte file for standalone headset limit, and that's actually quite hard if you've got a big game, and especially if you have a big game that you've had successfully in VR and desktop and then you have to put it to the Quest. Oof, that's going to take up a little bit of my time this year, actually. It's a bit difficult. Yeah, you're welcome.
Cool. And we also have 2 questions in the app, one of which being, do you have to use the Steam VR SDK to publish on Steam?
That's a really good question. I've never personally published to Steam without the Steam SDK. There's a difference between the Steamworks SDK as well and the Steam VR SDK. I would say that I would look that up, but I would say it's probably plausible that you could have like a SDK in OpenVR and still upload to Steam, because Steam VR works with those SDKs anyway. Does that make sense? My gut instinct is that it should work. It should work, yeah. But
Cool.
look it up.
Awesome. We have 2 more questions.
Yep.
And one of which being, are you guys considering expanding to virtual production services in the future?
Somebody here knows Staples. I see you. If I'm being completely honest, I do have a little bit of NDA around that, but I guess that answers its question in itself, really.
Cool. And the last one is, what does animating in VR look like in the future?
In the future? Oh, well, what does it look like in the future? It depends, because there's so many different ways you can think about it. Are you, if someone in the room can tell me, are you thinking about animation-wise, or are you thinking about how it looks? Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't phrase my question very well.
Yeah.
I don't think there is VR at the moment in like animating VR, but like, is it a possibility for the future, like within like Maya or something, integrating VR, actually animating with a headset, like picture it like playing with an action figure.
Yeah.
With the headset on, you actually get to animate that, like hands-on experience would be pretty incredible.
Oh, okay. So just for the people who need to hear it on the mic, he's asking if you can actually use VR as a tool to help you animate, correct? So people are using VR as a motion capture tool. And that is how I see it most effective if you're using VR for animation. In terms of being able to see the animation and making tweaks live, I see that completely possible. And if someone wants to spend time creating that tool and sharing it, like, I think that would be popular. I think that you can get a lot of perspective in full size and how tall someone is, and that can help you with your animation. So I think we've got time for maybe one more question.
I think the app's empty. I'll just do a quick refresh just to make sure. But is there any more in the room? Anyone would ask? Yeah? Getting lots of exercise today running around.
What are some good online learning resources for getting into VR that you can name?
Online resources for getting into VR. What do I go to? One of the biggest resources I found helpful is the example projects that come with the packages in VR that you can actually play with. I learn by doing and seeing how things work. So what you can do is you can download other people's projects that are open source and see how they did things different, because there's so many different types of movement that you don't understand until you're physically doing it. But I think that Steam VR is also a really good resource in their documentation. I mainly use forums for advice on any problems I have. There's a lot of game developers VR developers, that will post, I'm trying to do this thing and it's not working, and there will be no comments because they're working on something that just came out yesterday. So that's something to look forward to. But and reach out to your community as well. Other VR developers in New Zealand, gosh, I've had an instance where we needed to test something on a headset from a project, and we didn't have the headset in the studio, so I messaged on a forum on Facebook, I think one of the XR pages, and someone actually lent me a headset to do a build, and it was amazing. So the New Zealand community is really good for that in VR.
Cool. I think we've just reached 10:30, so I think we're going to have to wrap it up here. I would like to thank you, Krystal, and everyone else for coming.